Okay, we're all good to go now. So, hi everyone who joins in today and watches us. Want to introduce you to Nicole Webb. Thanks, Nicole, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Nicole hails from the land of the long white cloud, which is New Zealand. Nicole moved to Australia as a teenager with her family, and there she went on to pursue her dream of becoming a TV journalist and newsreader. After a decade of Sky News just that, Nicole and her baby bump and her husband James, who works at a five-star hotel, decided to do something akin to Carpe Diem. A few deep breaths later, Nicole and James found themselves in the city that never sleeps, Hong Kong, where the family, which now included Blondie Ava, survived and thrived for 4 years before moving, is it to Xi'an? Is that
That's
right?
it,
Yeah.
correct. Good job.
China, where they lived for almost 3 years. Nicole, James, and Ava are now back in Sydney for the time being, where Nicole works as a journalist, writer, and speaker. And China Blonde is Nicole's first book.
There it
So,
is.
and I've just been reading it. Only just started last night, but I've read about half of it, and really, really interesting, and some amazing things that happened. So, thanks, Nicole, for joining us. Is there some more you'd like to tell us about yourself or about your book?
Oh, gee, where to even start? Well, just I guess the bio says it all, but I was living in Sydney from New Zealand, as you mentioned, like you,
Hmm.
and I'd been a journalist for probably 15 or 20 years and in my comfort zone, a newsreader at Sky, living the life, and met
Hmm.
James on a blind date. And we got married. And, being in hotels, they always say they want you to move around and progress. So that was on the cards, but we sort of dismissed it straight away. But a year later or so, Hong Kong came up and something changed. As you said, that whole Carpe Diem thing, I thought, I
Hmm.
could still be here in another decade if we don't do this.
Hmm.
So James put his hand up for it and he got the job, and off we went and lived there. And 4 years had Ava there. And as you say, moved to Xi'an, which was a whole another experience, moving to the middle of China, even though we'd lived in Hong Kong. That, the Great Divide is very real.
Hmm.
So that's when I always thought I would write a book. Being a journalist, we like to think we've got a book in us at some point, but I wasn't quite sure what it would be. And, once we kind of crossed over into China straight away, I could see that that was this fascinating place, and there would definitely be a story somehow or
Yeah.
another.
Yeah.
So that's how it all began.
Mm. And had you tried writing, like started on a novel about anything else beforehand, or
No,
that was
you know
just,
what? I never had, and I always thought that I would. And I mean, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a librarian at one stage. So,
mm.
I always loved books, and I used to write these diaries, like huge diaries that went on for pages and pages. And apparently, when we moved to Australia, I'd write my friends huge letters back to New Zealand.
Oh.
So it was in me. But of course, then, you become a journalist, and while that's writing, it is very different to creative writing.
Mm.
So I started blogging in Hong Kong, which kind of, I dipped my toes in the water, I guess, with that, doing a bit of creative writing, and, writing a blog post, and then thought, well, how hard can it be to write a book? Just a lot of blog posts together.
Mm.
Of course,
Mm.
it's a lot harder than that, as I soon found out. But yeah, I've always written, but the craft of writing a book, well, that was a very steep learning curve.
Yeah. So you did no courses or anything for
I
creative?
did,
You
but I
did?
couldn't do
Mm.
those until I came back to Australia, obviously,
Mm.
because in China, there was no English really spoken where we were in
Mm.
Xi'an, and nothing like that. So, and I could have done online, but even then, the internet's a bit dodgy there and you
Yeah.
need a VPN. So, as soon as I started doing interviews in China, when I knew that I wanted to write a book, I sort of put my journalism skills to use. And
Mm.
my girlfriend was Chinese. I used her as a translator, and we went out and interviewed a whole lot of local Chinese people from all walks of life, um, old 91-year-old war veterans
Mm.
and young
Mm.
women and
Mm.
all sorts of people. And then when I started writing over there and just putting a whole lot of stuff on paper, really, I guess. And when we came back to Sydney, that's when I thought, there's a lot of courses I can do here. So I, started, I think I went to a day-long one at the Sydney Writers Festival, and eventually I went to Patty Miller's 6-week writing true life stories. So that was really good. And that sort of got me into the frame of mind that it's going to be a memoir, because before that I was like, I don't think I'm going to put myself in the story. I thought it'll just be something to do with China, and I wanted to educate people about the life over there. And everyone said, no, it's got to be your story, you've got to be in it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then I started that whole journey. And then I did a monthly workshop, which I'm still in to this day, with Lee Christine, who you interviewed recently. For 3 years later, we're still doing that. So that sort of keeps you accountable. You've got to sort of hand in words.
Yeah. And how long did it take you to write China Blonde?
I feel like once I got back to Australia, I remember when I went to Patty Miller, I had about 60,000 words, but they weren't in any shape. There were no chapters or anything like that. They were just all sort of there. And then I started slowly sort of shaping it. Once I went to Bernadette's group, I learned, how to sort of create one chapter and then lead into the next chapter. So I would say it probably took at least 12 months to get that first draft down before you could go back to then editing it. And then the whole process begins.
Yeah. And how hard or easy was it to get it published?
Hard, really hard. I mean, I knew it would be, but I sort of just kept persisting, and Bernadette helped me. We did up a proposal, as you do, and she sort of acted as my agent, and we pitched it to a lot of publishers. And as you do, you get a lot of rejections, or you get so far. I think one of the publishers in Melbourne, quite a big one, wanted to see some more chapters, so you get a bit excited, and then they want you to rewrite 5 chapters, and then then it doesn't happen, so you're like, oh no. But in the end, we found a small boutique publisher that really fit the bill, and we could work really well together. They believed in me, and we went from there.
Yeah. And how did you find the editing process?
I remember at first, by this point, I had 125,000 words, and they said you've got to cut it back to about 90 at least. So I was like, oh, okay. So, I printed it all out at Officeworks and had this giant folder, and, just went through sort of slashing and burning. But it's hard because it's your baby, isn't it? And you're like, I really like
and what
that
do you
part.
get rid of? Yeah.
And in the end, I gave it to Bernadette, who then went through it more, and she cut out quite a bit. And then we handed it to a structural editor. So she went through the whole thing. It took a couple of months, and sort of worked out, if chapters should be shortened or taken out, or things should be moved, or, add a bit more onto this, or add a bit more here. We want to feel what you were feeling here. So that took a while as well. Then once you go through all of those changes and things, and you've got to keep putting yourself back in that place, because you forget, especially because it was something that was in China and we'd left China, and I just kept poring over all the photographs and trying to remember how I felt, when I was in those places, and all the feelings and the smells and sensations and noises. So you've just really got to immerse yourself, I guess, somehow back into it to get those feelings on paper and try and bring everyone else into it.
And did you have someone who really encouraged you with your writing?
Everyone's was always super supportive of me, but I think I also had a sort of amateur writing group in the beginning that was sort of a spin-off from Patty Miller's class. There were just 4 of us, so we would meet up every couple of weeks, and while none of us really knew what we were doing, we sort of all encouraged each other, and that's great, love it, even if it's not. So that was really good. And then of course I had Bernadette's group, who were really great at critiquing it and supporting me the whole way. And I remember when I got rejected once by a publisher, and I was upset, as you are, and people said to me, look, you can wallow for a day, you're allowed to be upset, and then that's it, get over it, get on with it. And I remember someone said a really poignant piece of advice, just because you've written a book doesn't mean you're entitled to have it published,
Yeah.
which is, it's so true. And there are so many books out there every year that are written. But I thought, well, you know what? I'm still going to try.
And how have you found like the authors community? I've heard some authors say that there's no competition and everyone's really encouraging in that. How have you found that?
Yeah, I think that's very true. I have met so many authors, especially on Instagram.
Yeah.
You feel like you know them, and I guess when you read their books, even more so. But they're all really, really great and really supportive, and always, like your posts. And it is a really nice community. Even Rachel Johns. I sent her my book, and she had that in her to be read pile the other day, and just helping each other out like that. It's really nice.
And did you have some friends, like were they author friends who read as you were writing?
Only those the ones that were in the sort of amateur group, they were reading it. And then I guess in Bernadette's group, Lee Christine, who'd already written a number of books. Bernadette had been in publishing for 40 years. And a couple of the other two, they'd both written a lot as well. So, I had some pretty great, mentors around me to really guide me.
Yeah, that's great. And how have you found promoting your book when it's been a little bit harder with COVID and
luckily that's one thing I really like doing. It's kind of like a project for me. And because I've been a journalist and still do that, I guess I sort of see both sides. So it was interesting being on the other side, having to pitch to papers and all of that. And I've done most of my own publicity and had some, pretty good wins. It's not easy. And a lot of it is just sheer persistence. So you've just got to keep going, back to those people and reminding them and sending out a lot of free books and, just keeping your eyes open for any opportunities all the time. And I sort of missed out, I guess, on those author talks and those library talks and things because it was all in the midst of COVID, which are sort of the things I was looking forward to. But I'm starting to do a few of those now, which is good. So I think, you've just got to keep on going. And I've actually been asked to do some publicity for some other authors, which is, a bit of a spin-off from that. So that's good.
That's great.
Because I've sort of got a lot of contacts now and
they must think you're doing a great job.
Trying.
Do you have any author or writer festivals that you're booked in for?
I don't, no. And, that's another thing that I really need to sort of work on. And, it's all just such a steep learning curve. There's just so many kind of pathways to promoting it. And I've done a lot of sort of the media and, the magazines and the newspapers and the podcasts and all of that side of it. And then, there's the bookshops, and then I've got an author talk at a bookshop coming up in a couple of weeks. But the writers' festivals, I think, those ones in Sydney and Melbourne, you have to be invited and you have to be pretty good. So I'll write a few more books before that.
And we've got a few people watching and some questions coming in, which is great. So anyone else who wants to ask a question, please type it in comments. So Sina says she really likes the title of your book. And was that your idea, the title?
No, I cannot take credit for it. But you know what? It was it's one of those things you're always thinking, what am I going to call it? And I had all sorts of names, but nothing really fit. And that group I was telling you about, the amateur writing group, one of the women there was writing a book with China, a theme of China running through it, and had named her chapters, Shanghai Rose and things like that. And she said, yours would have to be China Blonde, wouldn't it? Like, you know what? Yep, I think that's it. And I just knew straight away. And, even a lot of the publishers that didn't take it on said they loved the name. So, it's good. I was lucky.
Yeah. And are you working on writing something at the moment?
I am. I've started a second one. It's fiction, women's contemporary fiction. So that's another whole new ball game for me and a steep learning curve. I've only got about 12,000 words. So very early days, but it's set in Hong Kong because, you know, we lived there for 4 years, and it's a great city, and lots of, you know, women from all walks of life, different scenarios coming together, friendships, that sort of thing.
And do you have a writer that really inspires you?
There are so many, you know. I like sort of really easy escapism, like Liane Moriarty and things like that, you know, Rachel Johns. I love those sort of books that you can read and you just get absorbed in them really quickly and finish them, you know, in a couple of days. You don't want to put them down. So lots of writers that do that sort of thing. I enjoy.
And Anne's just mentioned about your cover. So the cover's really bright and really stands out. So did you have much input in your cover?
Yeah, I did actually. With Brio Books, they did it, and they have this amazing designer, and it was just such a long-winded process, but really interesting. You know, we sort of, well, Bernadette had given them a brief of what we wanted, you know, the colourful sort of thing. And again, I wasn't sure if I would be on the front, but then they insisted I should be. So I was like, okay. And then they just came back with about 10 different coloured covers, sort of the similar thing with the lanterns and just different fonts. And so what I did was, someone suggested to me, print those out at Officeworks, the size of an actual book, and then put them on the books. And I had put them all up in the kitchen and was just looking at them thinking, okay, which one? And it's sort of back and forth, and can we just make this a bit, you know, more blue, or this a bit that? So yeah, but it was fun, really fun process. And when it was finally ready to be revealed, it was really exciting.
Yeah, I bet it was. And did you do something special to celebrate?
I did. I mean, I couldn't have, you know, the book launch that I was imagining, that I'd always dreamed of. My mum and dad couldn't come, or my sister. But I had a lot of mini book launches. So sort of each group of friends from all over the place, I would just have these sort of champagne lunches and take the books along that they'd all bought, and we had some good celebrations, so it was nice.
No, that's good. Sina's wondering what you like reading yourself, and if maybe there's anything you'd like to recommend to us.
At the moment, I am reading a few I've got about 5 books on the go at the moment. I've got the Dictionary of Lost Words, of course, which is a huge bestseller. I've only read a little bit of that so far. Of course, I'm trying to finish Lee Christine's, who you had on the other day, because while I was heavily involved in critiquing it, because she's in my writers group, I've not read it sort of from front to back as it is. And another girlfriend of mine who is an author, that's a YA.
I haven't heard of
Emmy
that one.
Tudor Queen. It's the second in the series. You there?
Sorry, we lost you for a little bit, but you're back again.
That was good.
Yeah.
So that's
I haven't heard of that one before. That looks good.
New author, but it's really interesting if you like the Tudor times and historical fiction. And of course, this is another one that's ridiculous, isn't it? So I'm reading that. Yeah, so I just kind of go from one to the other. Read a bit here, read a bit there.
Yeah.
Read a bit of everything. They say you should read a bit of everything if you're an author, so I try to.
Yeah, quite a big range of genres you just showed there.
Yes.
Oh, I can see your cat climbing up the wall.
He always does this whenever I'm doing something on a podcast or live.
Wants to join in.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what you think for yourself makes a good story?
Oh gosh, I guess it has to be a page turner, I guess. And for me, I like stories that I can relate to. You know, that you can put yourself in their shoes and imagine what that would be like. So it's that whole, you know, idea of, I guess, the plot. And I'm, you know, writing plot is really tricky. I'm good with characters, and I love characters and developing them, but actually those, you know, those plot twists and turns that keep people turning from one chapter to the next, and that's why I said about Liane Moriarty, she does that so well, because you sort of kept guessing the whole way what's going to happen next, and at the end you're like, oh, didn't see that coming. So, it's just, it's so hard to put into words, isn't it? But it's it's something special, I guess, that the writer's got to try and convey that to the reader as well, and not sort of leave them sort of thinking, don't really want to carry on with this,
Mm.
Yeah.
And are you happy to share something from China Blonde that maybe something that you found really that you didn't expect to happen when you were in China?
Something I didn't expect to happen.
That
Probably
really
everything.
surprised you.
I think, well, I guess what surprised me in the end was how much, and I don't want to give away spoilers, but how much we came to love it, because we went there and I did suffer quite a bit of culture shock in those early days, because it was so different to Hong Kong, it was a second tier city in China. So while there were 9 million people, many of them were from farms. Many of them had never seen a white person ever, just on television or in the movies. So when Ava and I walked out the door that first morning of the hotel, there was a big pagoda opposite that was a tourist attraction. But I think we became more of a tourist attraction, because everybody just crowded around us and were taking photos and trying to touch us, especially Ava, because she was this little blonde pocket rocket. So it was so daunting, and I didn't obviously have much Mandarin at that time. Just learning a new culture and, trying to fit in when you do feel like such an alien. If I went out when my phone battery died, I wouldn't know how to get back or how to convey where I was. You don't know anything, you don't know anyone. And it wasn't really until Ava went to school that I started meeting a few expats. A lot of teachers were expats, and there was just a really small pool of expats there as well compared to Hong Kong. So it took a while to sort of meet friends, and it's very different, isn't it, visiting a city to actually living in a city. So as much as it was amazing, the thought that you're sort of stuck there was like, oh my god, how am I going to survive this? But eventually somehow it becomes your new normal, and you start to feel, you find a doctor, although he couldn't speak a lot of English, but I had a doctor who could help us if we were desperate. Found a hairdresser, a supermarket. You find those little things that make daily life go round. And, once you can speak a bit of Chinese, you feel a bit, you've got something, a bit of, something to go out there in the big wide world. You can order a coffee at least.
I love the story about the doctor and how personal he seemed to be and how caring and that.
I know. He was a character, You went there and he was more interested in speaking English to me. And, what doctor walks you out to the front of the car park and then has a photo with you and then waves you off like you've just been for Sunday lunch. It's like, where am I? And,
So do you think it was just you getting special treatment, or he didn't do that to all his...
I think he just loved Westerners, and that's the thing a lot of people don't realise about the Chinese community, that they really do embrace you, and they really are open to Westerners and interested in us and what we do and what we think. I used to go to the hairdresser and have some shopping bags, and they would always be like, what does that white girl shop for? What has she got in there? Is it something different? And so I'd pull everything out and say, it's just this. But they were just so intrigued, So, I did learn a lot about the culture that I really never expected to learn.
And when you were writing China Blonde, were you still working in your other job as well?
Well, I freelance, so ever since we came back to Australia. So I gave up my job as a newsreader when we went to Hong Kong, and I started freelancing over there, just doing a lot of writing for different websites and magazines and copywriting and a bit of media training and a bit of emceeing. So everything's sort of related to media. And then I could do a little bit of that in China. I couldn't obviously work as much because I had housewife on my visa, Bluey. So yeah, I couldn't work as much in China. I did do an MC gig once, which you might read about in the book, which was pretty hairy. And then I came back to Australia, and obviously more opportunities have opened up again. And so I'm still freelancing. And so I would just write the book, you know, as a bit of a day job as well.
Yeah.
Along with everything else.
So do you have a set time during the day that you like to write?
Not really. I'm one of those people that kind of has fits and starts, you know. I won't do anything for a week or two, and I'll just be thinking about it in my head, and it'll all come to me at night when I'm lying in bed. And then I'll sit down one weekend and churn out, you know, 6,000 words or something.
Yeah.
So I sort of tend to write like that. But then once I start up again, if I just do a little bit each day, I think I'm better at night, you know, just when I'm not planning it, and I just sit down with the laptop and start doing it. Yeah.
And Anne's wondering if you have a contract for your new book.
I don't yet,
don't?
no. So I guess that's another thing I've got to face. But, you know, I guess this time around I'm much more aware of how it all works. And I've got so many more contacts, and, you know, hopefully having a book out there already will make it easier.
Yeah.
You know, because eventually I would like to get to that point, like a Rachel Johns or someone that does a book a year. And, you know, that would be fantastic. So it's, but that doesn't come overnight, you know, you've got to keep at it and keep persisting. So that's what I'll do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good luck with that. Hopefully we get to see it out.
Yep.
And Nalima's wondering if everything in China Blonde is based on real experiences.
Yes, everything is real,
everything.
Absolutely. So, you know, I had to change a few names, mostly names of those people that were Chinese, just in case, you know what it's like over there. And I had to be quite sensitive writing it as well to the culture and think of a lot of things. You know, I couldn't say too, you know, you could say enough, but not too much. So, but it's all true. It's all real. It all happened.
Yeah. And we've got a few people saying good luck with getting a contract. They hope that they get to read your new book.
Thank you very much, everyone.
And would you like to tell people how they can keep in touch with you?
Yes, okay. So I'm on all the social media channels, Instagram and Facebook, Nicole Webb Online. My website is Nicole Webb Online as well. You can buy China Blonde there or on Booktopia or in all the bookshops. But come and say hello to me. I love meeting new people. It's fantastic, and I love this community especially.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's been great chatting to you, and I'm looking forward to finishing China Blonde.
Thank you so much for having me, Jackie. Really appreciate it.
And thanks to everyone who joined in, and we had some great questions. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. See you again.